Well, hello to the talk, the different perspectives needed for self-organization. Within the next 40 to 45 minutes, I will take you on a journey that, well, more or less defined my life within the last 3 years. And this talk will show up some perspectives that myself and colleagues, coaches discovered whilst that journey. And who is speaking here? First, Susanne Schwarzer. She's a colleague of me, working as coach and consultant at our company, and myself, Stefan Rudnitzki, working as a lead developer. And just in these first 3 slides, I lied twice. First of all, it's just not us, it's just me. Susanne was not able to join us today, and so it's only me. It has to be enough. And on the other side, I introduced myself as lead developer in a self-organized company. Can that be right? Well, no, not really. It's just my last official title. I just did not change it yet because I didn't feel the need for it. If I'm asked, what are you doing for a living, for example, on the birthday party, then this answer, I'm working as a lead developer in a software company, does not help most of the people. Well, this answer also not really, because I work in a company that introduced Holocracy, and in Holacracy you bundle responsibilities and accountabilities in roles, and this is just a set of roles that I have as a person. I have lead responsibility, I have responsibility for contract topics, for certain coaching facets, and for facilitations, recruiting, and employer branding, for example. And sometimes I'm still developing. And this is rather hard to really understand if you have no experience in working in a holocracy or in a sociocracy or in a self-organized company. And this is quite overwhelming. But interestingly enough, most of the people, let's say, at birthday parties have a better understanding of certain aspects of this than of a title like lead developer. Just as a brief sneak info, what is Europace? Europace is a company that creates a platform for B2B to C mortgages and loans, and so we work in the financial sector. We consist of 150 people, roughly, and our parent company called Hypoport consists roughly about 1,500 people. And we are trying to move all these different companies towards self-organization. Just to give you another example, what was leadership at Europace 4 years ago? Well, it was not different than any other German company. We had hierarchies, we had executive managers or line managers, we had steering boards, and we had normal roles like head architects or product owners. And nowadays Europace consists of partly autonomous teams. We call them units. And every unit has the possibility to decide how they want to, let's say, install leadership. At my unit, we decided to split the classic team lead role into 4 different aspects. One aspect is contract topics, salaries and stuff. Another aspect is personal development of people and caretaking. We call that confident. Furthermore, we have certain coaching aspects in another role and the whole bunch of technical and functional leadership roles like product ownership and that stuff. And the funny thing is, especially these, let's say, classic leadership functions like salaries, contracts, and caretaking, we chose to let the people elect whom they trust in. That means we don't have 1 or 2 team leads. You can choose, if you join our team, at any time you can choose anyone you want. And if it is okay for you, and if it is okay for that person, and if it is okay for that team, the team, then voila, you have your contract person. What started this change? It was a vision. And after doing some research, this is basically what survived of this. We proclaimed 3 years ago, a modern company needs something that comes after being agile. Something where humans can show their full potential and be effective following their perceived responsibilities. And if you ask me, this vision basically consists of product facets, human facets, and rational facets. And when Susanna joined our company roughly a year ago, she read this and she came up with her own perspective. And this is a vision from a coaching perspective. Bring the facets of your own beliefs and your working environment to resonance. This allows us as humans to be our true self and understand that this is more than enough. If you ask me, I would say these two texts mean the same thing. They just differ in their perspective, in their wording towards a vision. And when we share that vision, when we share the things that resonate inside of us, then often enough we get this reaction. Or, are you serious? Or, I heard you work like that. Really? I highly doubt that this is reasonable. Well, yeah, we work like that, and we try to get better at that every day. And we struggle. And this is why I want to share certain aspects with you. Because I strongly believe that this is a great opportunity for us all to think about what is a future after being agile, after introducing Scrum, Kanban, and all that tools and all that frameworks. What's next in our industry, where we can try out so many new things. And to quote Simon Sinek, he once said, "Leadership requires two things: a vision of a world that does not yet exist, and the ability to communicate it." And from my point of view, this represents the first major important perspective when it comes to a change towards self-organization or getting agile. It's a way of thinking. Yeah? You need to think about models, you need to think about a vision, you have to imagine it in your mind, and then think about how to communicate it. How do people understand what inspires me? How do I get my point across? On several talks on Wednesday, we were able to encounter at this very conference 2 talks about why does companies exist and mindfulness. Has this something to do with thinking? I would say no. If you read the literature, you often enough read this term, purpose. And this is something that we encountered on our trip, on our way towards self-organization, I think roughly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And we asked ourselves, well, is it a project? No, it isn't. Is it a vision? Well, first of all, we believed it is. But if you ask me now, it is more. If you want me to describe what purpose really means, it's really hard to describe it. I would say purpose is something that is touching, that is inspiring, that is honest, genuine, and especially that is moving. It moves you towards something. Maybe something you don't understand, but it helps you to move towards it. It is where your energy comes from. And if you read literature about it, you will stumble about the concepts of why, how, what from Simon Sinek, the Golden Circle, or maybe the Big Five for Life from Strilecki, or just the plain purpose for existing. And this sounds rather strange, especially if you are a developer by heart. Because, hey, Why, how, what? Okay, I think most of us know the talk by Simon Sinek. This is something that is reasonable, that is practical, that is observable, especially by his examples. But purpose for existence? This can feel rather strange if you think about it. And what we encountered was that it is strongly connected to consciousness development. Because everyone in this room has different perspectives, different opinions, and different points of view. And maybe some of you say, hey, The Big Five for Life, I read that book, it was awesome. And maybe others say, I tried to read it, it was not for me. And how do you get these different points of views together so that they look in the same direction? What may be necessary if you make a major change towards something like self-organization? How do you integrate this and cross-link this? Because you need it, because you need both perspectives. Henry David Thoreau once said, it is not what you look at that matters, it is what you see. And if you ask me, I would say he meant this. Let's assume we can observe two developers talking about architecture. One of them believes in crosses, the other one in lines. And both of them are strongly convinced that they want to improve the product. But they just don't get it. They just don't have the feeling that they can trust each other because they don't understand each other. Maybe one says about the other, I don't understand why he simply does not understand such a simple thing. It is so obvious. It's just crosses. Everywhere are crosses. And the other one says, well, lines? Anyone? Who knows that? What we need is the acceptance for each other that there are lines and that there are crosses and maybe circles, dots, and that is okay, and that there is no real right or wrong. When we encountered situations like this in our change process, we came to the smart idea to read more literature, to try to understand more models. And so we read literature about the famous Thiel from Frédéric Laloux, like Reinventing Organizations, maybe you know that book, or spiral dynamics, or stages, or graves, and try to, let's say, understand how the world around us and how people develop and how everything functions and works together. And after several months, we came to the conclusion, okay, this is interesting and we understand a lot more now, but can we really think that it is a good idea to let 150 people go the same way, to read all the literature, understand all the models, just to be able to talk to each other? Isn't there a smarter way? And so we came to methods. And so we encountered things like transactional analysis, why do certain dynamics in certain processes exist, and so forth. And we strongly focused our attention towards positive psychology. For example, the affective balance. Do you know what it is, the affective balance? Hands up if you know it. No one. Okay, let me just give you a brief example. Affective balance means every word, every phrase, every thought, every assumption has a positive or a sort of negative emotional reaction. For example, dentist. How does it make you feel? Who feels positive emotions when thinking about a dentist? Hands up. 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now, let's try the opposite. Healthiness. Who feels positive emotions about healthiness? Way more. Interestingly enough, I think the arms that went up by dentists were because a dentist helps me staying healthy, even if a treatment may be painful, for example. And this is what's rather interesting about this. It's a small tool where you can check if certain situations, certain wordings, phrases, whatsoever, have a positive meaning for the audience, for yourself, or not. And based on what you're trying to achieve, for example, giving feedback and talking dentist, 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 I don't know if that's the right way. So you can check your arguments, your thoughts up front, if they are positive, if you want to be positive. This one is based within the Zurich resource model. This is a great tool for helping teams to discover why they work together and to work better together. And one major conclusion that we had from the positive psychology was focus on strength of people, not focus on weaknesses. Can you imagine how awesome it is to make payment decisions by focusing solely on the strengths of people and ignoring their weaknesses? It's interesting as a mind experiment, for example. And one thing that I want to share in detail, because it really helped us a lot, is the personal system interaction theory by Kuhl. Who knows it? No one. Okay, great. So I will just show you our interpretation of that theory. I will just wait for the smartphone. Okay. Our interpretation of the PSI theory from Kuhl looks like this. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it beautiful? No, it is chaos, I know. Let me just introduce you to it. It is rather interesting because it tries to show how we think and how we interact and put that into a model and show the dynamics and the changes between these states. And one state that developers really know really well is, it works, amazing. Intentions, plan, and pursue goals. This is something like, please develop feature X, Y, Z, and therefore we have this list of acceptance tests. Then you have a goal, you work towards it, you make a plan, what you need to change, what code you need to touch, and all that stuff, and then you start doing it. And if you're finished, you switch the mode towards attention to details, where you focus on error and have a very strong sensitivity for discrepancies. And this is amazing, because at this state, you can really really great, 1, 2, 3, you can really check if you finished the story or if you did something wrong. And if you did do something wrong, well, then you switch back to, okay, does not work all the time. You switch back to the first mode of operation and make another plan and finish that. And to bring it in an extreme, if you make test-driven development, you switch between those states in a very, very rapid manner. You write your test, it fails, you think how you change your business logic, and you write it again, and all that stuff, and you cycle through it. I would say developers are really, really efficient and really good at that. Let's do another example. Who of you attended in the brainstorming meeting? Hands up, please. Well, I would say half. Who associates really great experiences with brainstorming meetings? Okay, less. Maybe there's a hint why. If you ask me, brainstorming has something to do with easiness, with joy, with try and error, without focusing on error, without evaluating the results. And if you take a look, this lives on the, that is really not working, God damn it. It lives on the other side. And within a brainstorming meeting, you switch between intuition and self. Intuition, I think, is rather obvious. From your gut feeling, you're able to say certain things and state certain things, and this helps us, hopefully. And if it doesn't, it is not waste, because we learn something. The other status is the self. This is where your thinking meets your feelings and meets your experiences. This is where you as a person are really home. And this is a very fragile state. It can be, stressed by people who are in the mode of attention to details. And this is what most of the negative brainstorming meetings experiences come from. You have a group that is in a so-called flow state that cycles between intuition and self, and someone raises his or her arm and says, hey, this cannot work, this is wrong. And this leads to a change of mode for all attendees from this playful and joyful phase of flow towards, is he or she right? Did I do something wrong? And what did I do wrong? And how to fix it? And it is really hard to change the mode again up to the self or to the intuition out of that. So, what is this so-called self that I'm so convinced of? Who knows Niels Fleging? 2? Okay. He proclaimed theory X and theory Y in a very own way and tried to find out why working in a complex environment needs several changes in a personal attitude and the way we work together. And if you have the chance to participate on one talk of him, it may happen that you find post-it notes on the chairs in the room, and that he tries to explain what theory X and Y mean. And by theory X, he means it's based on Taylorism. Humans avoid work, and you need to enforce that people do work. And that someone, whoever, has the responsibility to align others to the company goals, for example, and that people are not able to make decisions. Therefore, we have managers who do the thinking and the decision-making, and this will lead to a culture of elbows and a focus on the own advantages. And on the other hand, you have theory Y people, who are intrinsically motivated and who believe that everyone has a high need to fulfill their own needs and who want to take responsibilities to, let's say, for a higher goal, like the company results versus humanity, for example. And therefore, these people tend to live and love and like collaboration. And what's really interesting, what Niels does while his talks, is he begs the people, or he invites the people to write on one post-it what they think they are, if they are Y or X. And we can now just make a small quick check. Hands up who believes he or she is Y. Interesting. I would say half. And hands up who believes that the people surrounding yourself at work are X. So who has X colleagues? Interesting, it's not working here. That means everyone who is X is not participating on this talk, or no one here who is participating on this talk knows anyone who is X. Interestingly enough, at the talks of Niels, you can encounter the situation where everyone from himself or herself is convinced to be Y, and everyone around your daily doing is X. So all my colleagues are X. And that's rather interesting, because how is that possible? If everyone in the room is Y, how high is the chance that no X goes to this talk? And this leads us to the mind experiment. If everyone is Y and everyone wants to collaborate and wants to be intrinsically motivated, how is that possible? And this is where I would say it comes to your own self, to the question, why are you here? To the question, what is your personal purpose? And to have clarity about that, to see that, to articulate it, you need clarity about yourself, and you need to be connected to yourself. And therefore, it helps to see humans as a human being with needs, beliefs, and all that stuff. And therefore, we have another thing that is called empathy. And Daniel H. Pink once quoted, "Empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes, feeling with his or her heart, seeing with his or her eyes. Not only is empathy hard to outsource and automate, but it makes the world a better place. And this leads me to the second perspective that is essential, in my personal opinion, to self-organization or changes towards agility, thinking and feeling. I said change. What does change really mean? Who in this room participated in agile or organization change? Hands up, please. It's nearly everyone. Maybe you now find yourself, you see yourself. Often enough, I participated 2 Scrum changes and 1 self-organization change, or maybe 2 self-organization changes, comes on how you count it. And most of the time, we change horizontally. That means we introduce methods, processes, and models, and we use workshops to the people to understand how these processes work and what they need to do. For example, if we introduce Scrum, then we make workshops for Scrum, and then we make stand-ups, and then there's this one colleague who always talks 10 minutes straight. How do we change the behavior of that person? In the past, often enough, I encountered a solution like, hey, here's a Scrum book, or this is not how the process works. You just need to answer these 3 simple questions. And please do it, everything else is outsourced to another meeting. So we try to convince the people that misbehave, for example, by showing them their errors on methods, processes, and models. So we make the same that they already received. So we assume they just did not understand it. What I would say is another way of changing an organization is do it vertically. That means look at the people, look at the strengths and the qualities that everyone in the company has, and start there. And not start by telling the people what they need to know, work with what is already there. And then choose a precise focus of what will be changed, and don't change the whole company at once. For example, if you want to change your company towards self-organization, you may start at a very, very narrow problem space, like, it is not that narrow, salaries. Why? Because salaries, it affects everyone in the company, and especially at a conference like this, completely independent from the place where you are working, you see why salaries is a good thing that everyone needs and that affects everyone. I would not recommend to start with salaries. Choose something else. But just a really narrow thing that in an ideal world, everyone affects within your company. And if you finished that and if you changed that, then iterate. Start with the next narrow, small thing. And do that as often as you need, until you need a pause or until you say, hey, we're done. There is nothing more. Mission accomplished. And how do you achieve that? Well, by communication. We have that by the quote of Simon. That means speech forms meaning because it influences thinking, and we all know, especially from magicians, oh, look here, it influences our awareness. Interestingly enough, it influences our self-perception, for example, by inner dialogues with ourselves, and our social perception, how others see ourselves by the way we communicate. For example, if we have a colleague who's swearing all the time, this does something with the whole team. And what is really interesting at that point is how important it is to be consistent, to have consistency within that person's self-perception and his or her social perception. In short, it is essential to be authentic. Because then people see he or she really shows what he or she believes in and shows us his or her needs. And it is easier to put trust in somebody who is kind of vulnerable because he or she shows really what is important to him or her and not just put on a poker face. In the end, it is a question of openness, of letting others see oneself and seeing others. It is essential, and we had that on the talk yesterday, that you have psychological safety. When I have the fear of being hurt, I will not show myself. This allows us to show positive energy. That means we can strengthen strengths, for example, focus on just the positive qualities of a person in a performance dialogue, and real, true appreciation. Because in the end, this is what really matters. It's not the money. Money is just a factor that defines if we start a job and if we feel fairly, let's say, paid. But the appreciation is what really matters. What really puts a smile on our face and what will truly let us go to work on a Monday with a big smile and with lots of joy. Furthermore, you need a true, authentic attitude that assumes best intentions in other people. In the talk yesterday, we had that topic already, where it means if you have someone who has a bad behavior, let's say in a meeting situation, where he or she really starts to rage, then you can assume that he or she is trying his or her best to get his or her point across. And that he or she just might need a helping hand. What do you need? What can I do for you? And not a reaction that flips the bozo bit and says, you're not okay. Shut up, don't behave like that. So you need the trust in the skills of others. And this will lead to a real further level of cooperation and truthful interaction, where people can speak out freely what they think and what they feel without the fear of being hurt or being laughed at, for example. And this needs continuous self-reflection to achieve that. Why should you do that? Why is it necessary? In the end, I would say, because we have the possibility to have real self-fulfillment, self-actualization, truthful personal responsibility, and not just doing stuff that someone told me to do, self-management, self-care, and self-awareness. And everything of this is needed for self-organization. You cannot just say a team, hey, you're self-organized, choose your battles, make your decisions, good luck. This will not help. And what do you need to align a whole organization towards that goal? Within the last months, Susanne and myself discovered, as we would call it, the resonance of purposes. That means we believe that everything has a purpose, everyone in this room. Maybe you know it, maybe not. Maybe you want to explore it, maybe not. Everything is okay. But as every person has a purpose, every organization has one as well. And most of the time, we are able to feel if we want to work for a company, for an organization, and decide on that feeling of gut if we want to participate, if we want to sign the contract. For example, I would say everyone in this room has a certain domain where he or she does not want to work for. For example, weapons or banks or whatever. And so it is rather easy at that negative example to have a connection to yourself and to say, no, I don't care how much you pay me, I'm out, I will not join you. This is a negative example of resonance. It pushes you away. But imagine if you have a company that really knows why that company exists, and it's not just because they want to earn money. And if that is something where you can strongly connect to and where you feel like, I really am convinced, I really believe that I am part of something, that I can move something. This is what we would mean by resonance of purposes. And therefore you need clarity about yourself, about your surrounding, and a strong connection to yourself, and clarity about your potentials, purposes, and goals in your life. And so, if you ask me, what do you really need for self-organization? It's these three perspectives: thinking, feeling, and purpose. With all these tools that we encountered within the last 3 years, and many more, there is more. It is a broad spectrum of research in psychology that helps people to get in touch, for example, with themselves. And I can really just recommend not putting it away, but maybe reading a book about it. Because if you want to start to change an organization towards self-organization, to introduce Holocracy or Sociocracy, for example, then you may change the way you work and the things that you believe in towards something different. And I, for myself, hope that our industry and many other industries are now on the edge towards that tremendous change, like back in the days when agile was something really new and no one had a clue how it works. Maybe we nowadays have the same situation, just towards another tool that is called self-organization. And to close this, I will just put on another quote from Niels Fleging, freely translated from German. He said, self-organization especially means to be committed within the cooperation between humans and for each other, not freedom, fun, something, purpose, something, or I can do whatever I want. And I would absolutely agree to that. Because most of the time, you can hear stories about self-organization where people interpret self-organization as, I can do whatever I want because I have a strong feeling of guts that this is necessary. And this is basically not true. Everything is aligned on the purpose of oneself and on the purpose of the company you are working for. And this is where the magic begins. Thank you.